Good evening. Hello, I'm Alice Hutchinson, the owner of Birds Books, an independent bookstore in Bethel, Connecticut, and I am honored to be the host of Write America. The aim of this series is to help set the country back on a correct, productive course of freedom, justice, equality, and plain human kindness. Write America is a literary series created by author Roger Rosenblatt, featuring award-winning, nationally renowned authors and new and emerging writers in readings and conversations each week about how books and art might bridge the deep divisions in our nation. Write America celebrates the quiet power of art in our lives, the unifying power of the highest uses of language. In novels, stories, essays, and poems, we recognize one another as parts of the human family, one family. Roger Rosenblatt, the creator of Write America, puts it this way: writing makes justice desirable, evil intelligible, grief endurable, and love possible. So with that, I welcome you, and please join us Monday evenings at this time as many of the most beloved and distinguished writers in the country read from their works and talk to each other and with you in an effort to bring us together. If you missed our last episode with Roger Rosenblatt and Grace Schulman, you can go to Birds Books Write America page and link to the episode easily. As most of you know, Write America will wrap up its 2-year run at the end of January 2023, and the recordings will reside on our Write America YouTube channel for you to watch at any time. Tonight's episode is also being recorded, so if you missed something, you can go back and rewatch. The link is right on the front page of our website, and it's also in the chat, the page. Tonight, we're hosting readings by and conversations with Linda Pastan and Miranda Beeson, and I will return at the end after the readings and discussion to bring your questions and comments to the authors. During the episode, please feel free to make comments or ask questions in the chat. We do ask that you remain muted, however. Our first speaker is Linda Pastan. Linda Pastan graduated from Radcliffe College, received an MA from Brandeis University, and an honorary doctorate from Kenyon College. She has published 15 volumes of poetry, including Insomnia, winner of the Towson University Prize for Literature, and A Dog Runs Through It. Her most recent book, Almost an Elegy, New and Later Selected Poems, was released October 4th of this year. 2 of her books have been finalists for the National Book Award. She has won numerous awards, including the Radcliffe Distinguished Alumni Award and the Maurice English Award. In 2003, she won the Ruth Lilly Poetry Prize for Lifetime Achievement. Pastan is a former Poet Laureate of Maryland. Her work has been translated into 6 languages. Please welcome to the screen, Linda Pastan.
Am I unmuted?
Yeah, you're unmuted. There you go.
Thank you for the introduction, and thank you, Roger, for these 2 wonderful years of Monday nights. I'm going to be reading from my new book, first a group of new poems, and then 1 or 2 from the books that I've selected. So I'm starting with Sting. A bee stung the palm of your right hand, or did you touch a nettle? There was the swelling, the burn of pain, a poison flower blooming in the flesh, and neither ice nor baking soda helped. You carried it around, right hand and left, as if it belonged to somebody else, and you were angry, not at the possible bee whose buzz was all you knew of it, not at the nettle, hidden scores of the summer garden. It was the wound itself that angered you, an early soldier in the army of afflictions waiting for us, even in the innocent grass. The next poem is called Plunder, and I wrote it when we were still living in the middle of 6 acres of woods, and a friend was telling me how she resented having to close her mother's house when her mother moved, and I didn't want my children to have to get rid of all my stuff, so I thought that maybe it was time to downsize. So this is Plunder to a young friend. On a day of windy transition, one season to the next, you spoke of helping your mother close her house, of the choices you had to make, what to discard, what to keep, as if it were your childhood itself waiting to be plundered. You kept a Persian rug, all reds and golds, to walk on every day, keeping the past alive under your feet. Those nested Russian dolls you played with as a girl, grandmother, mother, daughter, 4 bentwood chairs wrenched from their table. I listened, thinking I'd be next to try to crowd a lifetime of things into a shrinking universe of boxes. I've started dismantling my life already, throwing out letters from people I remember loving, choosing among books, this one to stay, that one to go, as if I were a judge sentencing some to death, the rest to the purgatory of the emptying shelf. Perhaps I should simply burn it all. But don't we live on in what we've left behind? In the fading twilight of Kodak, in our sterling knives and spoons tarnishing on a grandchild's casual table. Don't these become a kind of museum of the afterlife? The pharaohs had it right. They took their whole world with them, vases and chests, gilded statues, jewels, plundered perhaps, but not for 1,000 years. Nefertiti's tomb has never been found. And a very small poem. Instruction. You must rock your pain in your arms until it's asleep, then leave it in a darkened room and tiptoe out. For a moment, you will feel the emptiness of peace, but in the next room, your pain is already stirring. Soon, it will be calling your name. And this is Kristallnacht. Kristallnacht was the word I heard my parents whisper behind closed doors. And I pictured the world under a sudden enchantment of ice, each tree limb braceleted in crystal, each lamppost, each windshield glazed and electrically gleaming, the very air wincing with light. And the only sound would be a myriad tinkling as of 1,000 miniature wind chimes. The treacherous beauty of words, crystal night, the stars themselves blazing and frozen in place. Here. This is the title poem, almost an elegy for Tony Hoagland. Your poems make me want to write my poems, which is a kind of plagiarism of the spirit. But when your death reminds me that mine is on its way, I close the book, clinging to this tenuous world, the way the leaves outside cling to their tree just before they turn color and fall. I need time to read all the poems you left behind, which pierced the darkness here at my window, but did nothing to save you. Now I'm going to read some poems from older book. The first one is from The Last Uncle. It's Women on the Shore, and the woodcut that I speak of in the poem is the woodcut in the cover of my book. Women on the Shore. The pills I take to postpone death are killing me, and the healing journey we pack for waits with its broken airplane, the malarial hum of mosquitoes. Even the newly mowed domestic grass hides fault lines in the earth which could open up at any time and swallow us. In Edvard Munch's woodcut, the pure geometry of color, an Arctic sky, the luminescent blues and greens of water, surrounds the woman in black whose head is turning to a skull. If death is everywhere we look, At least let's marry it to beauty. And from the last uncle, what we are capable of, a meeting of prisoner abuse at Abu Ghraib. What we are capable of is always astonishing, though never quite a surprise. Astronomers find more evidence of dark matter, the newspaper says on the next page, a fact or metaphor. I think of those villagers in France who risked their only lives to save a handful of Jews, and I tried to find from that fading chink of light an incandescent path through all these darknesses. And I try to pair poems on opposite pages that seem to bounce off each other. Opposite that is, why are your poems so dark? Isn't the moon dark too most of the time? And doesn't the white page seem unfinished without the dark stain of alphabets? When God demanded light, he didn't banish darkness. Instead, he invented ebony and crows and that small mole on your left cheekbone. Or did you mean to ask, why are you sad so often? Ask the moon. Ask what it has witnessed. From Traveling Light, the ordinary, and the ordinary is something I think about all the time. It's what interests me more than anything else. The ordinary. It may happen on a day of ordinary weather, the usual assembled flowers or fallen leaves disheveling the grass. You may be feeding the dog or sipping a cup of tea, and then the telegram or the phone call or the sharp pain traveling the length of your left arm or his. And as your life is switched to a different track, the landscape through grimy windows, almost the same, though entirely different, you wonder why the wind doesn't rage and blow as it does so convincingly in Lear, for instance. It is the pathetic fallacy you long for. The roses, nothing but their thorns, the downed leaves subjects for a body count. And as you lie in bed like an effigy of yourself, it is the ordinary that comes to save you. The china teacup waiting to be washed, the old dog whining to go out. And from Insomnia, the gardener. He's out rescuing his fallen hollies after the renegade snowstorm, sawing their wounded limbs off quite mercilessly. I think of the scene in King's Row, the young soldier waking to find his legs gone. He's tying up young bamboo, their delicate tresses litter the driveway, shoveling a door through the snow to free the imprisoned azaleas. I half expect him to tend his trees with aspirin and soup, the gardener who finds in destruction the very reason to carry on, who would look at the ruins of Eden and tell the hovering angel to put down his sword. There was work to be done. And finally, from the older poems, from A Dog Runs Through It, the very last poem that anyone who has loved a dog will understand, Envoi. We're signing up for heartbreak. We know one day we'll rue it, but oh, the way our life lights up the years a dog runs through it. And I'm going to end with the last poem in the new poems section. It's a villanelle. It's called The Future. When do we trade the future for the past? A farmer plows his fields one final time. I think each poem I write will be the last. The world grows small. It used to seem so vast. Retirees lie in bed till after 9. When do we trade the future for the past? They pull on trousers, sigh, and cut the grass. And I have lost the lust for making rhyme. I think each poem I write will be the last. The words come slowly now. They once came fast. Each fledgling ode becomes a hill to climb. When do we trade the future for the past? There's TV and the crossword, days will pass, walks on hard pavement, cities etched in grime. I fear each poem I write will be the last. Uncoupled, metaphors go streaming past. The young are on their way. I watch them shine. When did I trade the future for the past? I think this poem I'm writing is the last. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Linda. Our next speaker is Miranda Beeson. Miranda Beeson's poems appear all over, including Barrow Street, the Southampton Review, Great Weather for Media, and Melville House's Poetry after 9/11, an anthology of New York poets. She is the author of Ode to the Unexpected and The Jones of It, a recent finalist for the Thomas Salmon Prize. Catch and Release, her collection of sonnets, is forthcoming from Dancing Girl Press. She's been the recipient of Palette Poetry Spotlight Award and a Jody Donahue Poetry Prize. She joined Stony Brook University, where she enthusiastically teaches creative writing and literature to undergraduates. Her manuscript, Wildlife, is scheduled for a 2023 release. The MFA ED at Stony Brook, Southampton, and lives on the North Fork of Long Island in New York City. Is that correct? You're gonna have to correct me.
You're shining, Alice. You're shining. You totally aced it. The North Fork of Long Island and New York City. Alliteration of consonants of N. Thank you. I just want to start out saying thank you to Roger Rosenblatt from the bottom of my heart, the heart and soul of this series. So many Monday nights during the pandemic, I was here, and it's been so meaningful. To you, Alice, for being such a great host and a moderator. And I'm just got to plug her bookstore now. Bird's Books, Bethel, Connecticut. Buy brick and mortar. Buy from Bird's Books. And just a quick shout out also to Lindsay Atkins, who I MFA'd with, who coordinates the engine of this series in the background, and has done such a beautiful job of it. And a general hello to like this great variety of friends from and fellow writers who I see on the screen. So thank you for being here. I'd like to give you a little shape of where I'm taking you, so you know I won't go on forever. It's always good to know. I'm going to read 3 poems from this forthcoming manuscript that's coming out with Spite and Dival in Brooklyn in early 2023, to give you a kind of a taste of that. And then I'm going to jump into some new work, which is a sonnet cycle that I've been working on since May. And I think I'm going to read maybe 5 or 6 of those. So that'll give you kind of the shape of where we're going. I'll start with Wildlife. This manuscript, I'm investigating beasts, and I'm also investigating Homo sapiens, human beings. Sometimes in this book, Homo sapiens are being a little bit more bestial than the beasts are. So that kind of gives you a sense of the theme of what's going on in here. And the first poem is Alpha Boars. The epigraph is from an article in the New York Times. Radioactive boars in Fukushima thwart residents' plans to return home. We light our wild boar way through deserted streets, a dim burn at dusk, our tusks bright as Jupiter by midnight. The fungi In the fungi farm, termed bright blue, they were the first to radiate. I crave shiitakes. We snuffled them all up. Those first few years were glorious. No two hooves in sight. Rats took supermarkets, all-night parties in the soba noodle aisle. Dogs kenneled two-hoof dens, tore down doors, looted cupboards, curled up on down-filled quilts, off leash at last. Yes, we finished off some chicks, but I mean mine hot-footed it, leaving their hens and cows and hogs in pens to starve and die. We were more humane. I say every beast should live in clover and die a quick, good death. We are but links in great food chain. My piglets gleam, born neon pink. They grow saber-toothed tiger tusks, rippling mercury fur. My little tribe runs wild, tusking here and there, no fear. I had forgotten too, but 6 years' news came back. Times two are doubling back. Shots in the night, news of culling, furnaces, mass bore graves, brutal two hooves on the move, but not for long. For we are nuclear Thor strong now. We have shining X-ray eyes. Our hooves flick atomic fire. To the Boers. This next poem, I got to laugh there. This next poem is a ghazal, G-H-A-Z-A-L. My friends out there will know how much I love poetic form. It's 5 stanzas, they're couplets. There's always got to be a word that jumps in in the second line. And then the writer has this challenge. They have to insert their name somehow into the last couplet of the ghazal. This one, there's a few pauses in there. They're purposeful. We call them caesuras sometimes. This is for the ex of your choice. You were a sheep, a wolf, a charmer, and a bastard. Cock of the walk, well combed too, you beautiful bastard. Praise for others before me and after, and those kids, well, the one was like you, a crazy bastard. Still stuck up there on the cross of your childhood? My God, you had it and us all, you lucky bastard. Chameleon-like, you lizarded your way into hearts that swooned for you, and I bet some still do. Poor bastards. No longer silent, to hell with our Miranda rights. We hereby ghazal you, you cheeky, yes, rat bastard. Got to write a ghazal. They're so much fun. You could do that at home. And the last one from this section, I'm watching my time because I want to get those sonnets in. Which one am I going to go to? Yes. This is actually a somewhat formal sonnet. It looks like this. The other ones I'm reading are super different. Cutchog, April 1, 41.0107 degrees north, 72.481, 51 degrees west. The fishhawk is back, surveying his nest from his usual perch, an edifice of twigs, twisted seagrass, popped rainbow, birthday balloons, a red shred of t-shirt, the glitter of tinfoil from picnics on the beach, the detritus of man. Soon his mate will arrive from the tip of a peninsula in French Guiana, squeezing the Earth's magnetic field for signs pointing north over the Caribbean to Hispaniola, Cuba, riding the thermals 2,700 miles home. Somewhere on the Aegean, between Turkey and Greece. Citizens are squeezed together in zodiacs that know nothing of stars. They huddle under the weight of waterlogged life jackets and fear. A tiny motor sputtering its way toward unfamiliar lights over a sea of broken paddles, backpacks, glittering lost cities. That is a taste of wildlife for you, forthcoming in 2023. I'm going to jump to these. Oh, good. Time is great. I'm going to jump to the set of sonnets. I started these in May. I was living in a farmhouse in the North Fork, a big old farmhouse, and there was this giant field behind me. It's so beautiful. So, of course, what is a poet to do? The sonnet sequence is therefore entitled Field. I'm trying to let it go for a year. I'm trying to write a sonnet a week, which is wicked. I can't always do it. And I'm hoping it will be its own new book by next May or Huzzle. Somebody put that. I'll get back to you on the Huzzle in the chat. These sonnets are loose pentameter. They're very boxy because I feel it's important how a poet looks on the page. So they look like this. They're like, and they kind of stream down the page. And I picked these 6 because 727 were good. They have a nice narrative arc to them. And I'll just go straight through. Field. It's May. Everything is being born. Isla, the Springer Spaniel, pup is rustle, quiver, and tail in the long green field. Mugwort, an invasive species to us, is a forest for her. In the distance, the meshing of a thresher, rhythm and blues. Like Artemis, goddess of the hunt, Isla brings 5 baby rabbits back to Ahmad, the handsome Iranian who's stopping for a while behind the farmhouse. She lays down her offerings for the one she loves, tiny, hairless, round balls of pink, here and gone. She looks up to his brown eyes as he weeps. 2. When the loon surfaces on the flat 5 o'clock bay, I realize we have both been underwater for far too long. It dives again, and I hold my breath. A fish flips, a gull circles, a cloud lifts. The lone roar of a motorcycle going fast somewhere far away, farther now, like youth ebbing into a fume of age. I wait and wait. They say loons can dive 200 feet, stay under for 5 minutes, until I see its sleek head repunctuate this wide blue field. I feel its surge, its buoyancy, our shared exhalation. What is it but the desire for life? 3. Heat creates a sheen over the 90-degree treetops. It's a late June one-off, but as we know, there's more to come. And I don't just mean July. I've been watching this particular tree at the far end of the field since early March, how it has insisted on becoming its current, perfectly beautiful self. An image of fulfillment for the eye and the spirit as well. How, if we are simply left alone to do what we were born to do, everything seems to work out just fine. How I want to hold you in the here and now and tell you all of this, and yes, this too. 3, 4, I've lost my numbering here. I'm waiting for the rain on the porch. The weatherman keeps saying yes, while nature keeps saying no. Or would that be mankind who is carboning us to death? It's August. Audrey L., as in Audre Lorde, says the only answer to death is the heat and confusion of living. I'm in the thick of it right now. The heat of out of left field love when I thought that was all over and done. The confused beat of my born again teenaged heart. The old push pull I forgot how to have and hold. Should I grab it with both hands or write a sonnet like my life depends on it, which without you, it just might. I am fielding. 5. Finally, some rain. The field burnishes coppery and wet along with my thoughts. The shift of light that comes this time of year when mesmerizing days and desire fray towards the inevitable. Isla, pure pup in May, has learned her commands. Sit, stay, lie down. Her Chanel svelte self still races the runway for the one she loves, but her insouciant wildness has been tamed. A few months was all it took. And us too, cut to the quick, then spliced in two, left to conjugate the verb to leave, to carry on in metaphor. The field burnishes coppery and wet, love and a tin cup. And for the last sonnet, I'm giving you a heads up, Alice. She asked for one. I think this is 6 or 7. The fireflies have met up, had sex, and died. Nature can be as efficient and cruel as mankind, while I watch each day cut and paste itself into something smaller. Dragonflies swerve like the flight of my incessant 3 a.m. mind. Why does the living of life never quite add up to life? I guess that's why some of us spend time with God. I can hear the field these days, no need to look. It's singing morning, noon, and night. I feel the mugwort's burning edges, September tasseled in goldenrod, the falling of the light, a quilt last night, the need to know someone is listening. That's it. Over to you, Alice. Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure. I've been so happy to be here with you all. Really great, especially you, Linda.
So I guess we just begin.
Yes, so Linda and I were talking before about what to talk about. And I'm reading her gorgeous book right now. And I just had this whole kind of series of thoughts about new work and old work. And I'm always in love with my new work, and I tend to discard my old work, which is very unfair and has led to publication issues. Sometimes now I look back at my older work and I think, oh, it's just fine. It's beautiful. So it led me to this thought process, and I knew I was going to be seeing Linda about, she has the whole new selection, the new section, but how she crafted and chose the books from her older books, like what that process was like in terms of making those selections from, is it 3 or 4 other books, Linda?
5, yeah.
5, yeah. So I find that fascinating. I hope other people do too. If we could maybe talk back and forth about that.
Yeah. Well, what I'd like to say first is that this is my second new and selected. This is new and later selected. And my first one, I don't remember how I selected the poems, but I know that I made lots of mistakes. There are poems in that volume that I wish weren't there. And when I read my older books, I said, how could I have left that out? So that's something you have to think of. Of course, choosing the new ones, I think I have 30 new poems out of maybe 60 or 70 that I think are okay to publish in magazines, but I don't think are good enough for a book. But that was easy. But I went through every book and I knew about how many I should choose. And the ones that I said, yes, this has to be in, it was just instinct. There was no intellectual thought, what kind of poem should I choose? Just these are the ones that I can't do without. And now that we don't travel much because of the pandemic, it isn't so important. But with my first New and Selected, I would travel all over the country giving readings, and I didn't want to carry all these books. So I carry the New and Selected, sort of the others just were in purgatory. They never got read anymore. That won't happen now because I don't plan to be traveling around the country, even if the pandemic ever ends. But it's instinct, I think.
Is it instinct?
You know when a poem works, maybe not right away, because as you said, whatever I've just finished, I think is perfect. And then I look at it 2 weeks later and I said, oh no, not that. So
I don't even get that long. I look at it the next morning and think, what were you thinking? Right. You were in love with it last night, and like this morning, it's all full of briars and prickles, right. And
the umbilical cord hadn't been cut yet.
No, totally. But that's that's process, right? Which was kind of, I was thinking about, were you thinking thematically?
No.
When you were including sections from the other books. No, you were just saying this poem's still working.
Right.
My instinct says it should be here, regardless of its relationship in a way to the other poems. Or
on the other hand, when I was just putting together a book, not a New and Selected, then I would spread all the poems out on the floor and look for relationships, because the book had to have a kind of a theme. And as I said, when I was reading, the poems opposite each other had to bounce off each other. And I remember in one of the books, when they sent me the proofs, they had made one mistake. They, it was off by one. So none of the poems were the ones that they were supposed to be. And I called immediately and said, help, you can't do this. And luckily, you just pressed a couple of buttons and they fixed it.
I think it's when I was working with Julie Shan on this manuscript, she had this great phrase of like, how are the poems talking to each other, which is a really nice way to think about it. And I also lay everything out and I tell my students to do the same thing. I said, I know you don't like hard copies and paper and you live on your phones, but print them out, put them on the floor, take your shoes off, and then walk around them and see which ones are talking to each other. And also you don't want, two thematically similar poems too close to each other. You want variety, but you also want them to the poems to be in conversation with each other as you're moving through, kind of putting the manuscript together.
I always think that putting together a book is like a poem in itself.
Yes.
When you're finished with it. I remember a very early book, The 5 Stages of Grief, when I had them all of a sudden, all of the poems fit into one of those 5 stages. I mean, it was miraculous. I don't know how that happened, but it did.
That's a good moment, Linda.
Yeah.
That's a great moment. I don't know. So thank you. Because I've just been thinking a lot about process and putting these books together. Wildlife went through many, many revisions. It went through long sections. It went through short sections. Poems, I fell in and out of love with poems. Poems came out, poems came in. But it's also a way, like when you're sending a manuscript out, the way we journeyman poets too, is that to keep it alive, if you don't revise it, then it starts lying down and it lies down and it goes dead, right? That you have to constantly kind of refresh it and reinvent it. And would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
But this is my last book. I'm quite certain of that.
Oh, don't say that.
Don't say that. I'll miss putting things together, because that that really was exciting in many ways. I was going to ask you, when I started publishing, there were very few poetry books out in the world. You sort of read everything that came out, and there were not many journals in which poems were published. So you read all of those too, and you got to know the poets. Now there are so many magazines, there are so many books. I don't know how to begin keeping up. And I find that mostly when I read poetry every day, and I mostly turn back to the poets of my generation, all of whom have died in the past 10 years, like Gerald Stern, who just died last week. And love reading those poems and want to find new voices and don't exactly know how. I mean, I read certain journals, and if I find a poem there by someone I've never heard of, then I'll go find their book. But I mean, it's enormous, the number. I don't know if it's good or bad that so much poetry is coming out.
I mean, I think it's glorious that so much poetry is coming out. I think I just find there's thousands of places to submit to these days, and there's thousands of places to read. I think you always have to go back to yourself and what interests you, like who is publishing, and who's publishing work that is of interest to you, who's publishing your friends. Can you publish your friends? I think even though the world has gotten bigger, also due to Submittable, on average, I know my friends here will say, when we're submitting manuscripts, we're competing with 400 to 800 other books, right? Because everybody can press send, right? It's the days of going to the PO are long over. So that's also kind of a glut there. You feel terrible for the editors. They have to read 800 books, right? But I think it always comes back to, who do you love? Whose work do you love? And I think we always make our own circle. These are the people, these are the poets I love. This is the work I love. And then you also, form relationships with editors who like your work, and it's the same thing. You send it, to that editor saying, and what about this one? And do you like this one? Because they've published some of your poems before. So I think it always comes down to the personal, Linda.
Right.
And maybe that's a good thing.
I was going to ask you a question about form, since I went through a period where I couldn't stop writing sonnets.
Join my world.
it seemed so much easier to me than free verse, where you had to invent the form with each poem, but all the work was done for me. And I finally had to say, stop, try something else. You've written enough sonnets for a while. But I was wondering, how you felt, since you clearly are into sonnets as well.
I'm into sonnets. I also say this to my students who don't believe me. There is freedom in constraint, because they're 19 and they don't want to be constrained, right? They want to just flip out. But I like the constraint that it's 14 lines, and I like compression, how much to get maximum emotional impact from the fewest amount of words. So I like the container, the shape of the container. You've got four more lines to go. You can see how verbal I am. Shut up, Miranda, and just get the 4 lines in. So I like the constraint of it. Also, with working with a cycle of sonnets, I find this intense pleasure that it's always waiting for me every day, as opposed to when it's like, oh my gosh, it's a new page, it's a new poem, I have to begin all over again. So in this process, I have these 2 pleasures. One, the constraint of, you've got 14 lines, girl, you don't have 18. So pare it down. But also, it's always waiting for me in the morning, which is such a great feeling, that it's a body of work that you're connected to, and it's there. And you can also, I can pull some out, I can put some in. So it has a feeling of connectivity and continuity to it. So I guess that, I don't know if that answers your question. I sort of like the constraint, but I like the fact that it's a cycle because it has momentum.
I've always envied novelists because, you know, for a couple of years, they can keep going back, and starting is the hardest without the blank screen.
Right.
Once I have one line, that's fine, but that first line.
The first line. And here, there's always, if my mind hasn't come up with that first line, I can always go back to 1, 2, 3, and 4. And in reading that previous work, my little engine gets going. It starts going, and before I know it, the previous work has given me the first line.
Well, what I do for many, many years, I started writing when I was 12. I stopped. I got married when I was still in college. And until I was 30, I didn't really write at all. And then I decided I'd have to discipline myself, and I would have to sit in the study every morning for 3 or 4 hours, whether I wanted to or not. And I found that when I was completely blocked, there were 2 poets whose work I would turn to. Oh. One was William Stafford, because he made it sound so easy. You were in conversation with him almost, and I started a poem, and I'd have to cut out the first couple of lines because those were Stafford's lines that I was using in my poem.
Nice.
And the other was Galway Canal, particularly his Book of Nightmares. Those metaphors would get me so excited that I would have to start finding some metaphors myself. And
yes, I mean, I think that is, if I can't get into the page, I'm always reading somebody else's work. I have a stack, they're clipped. I pull them from everywhere. And there's the Andrea Cohen poem that was recently in the New Yorker. When all else fails, I'm traveling around with it, literally, so I know that if I can't get the engine going, I can read Andrea's poem. She's such a fantastic poet. And something will happen there, right? It triggers something in
my poem to Tony Hoagland.
Yes.
When I read his poems, it just made me, they were so entertaining in a way that it loosened me up.
It makes you want to write. It's reading somebody else's poem and you go like, oh gosh, I feel like writing a poem all of a sudden, right? That's such a great poem, that one that you had. Yeah. So is Alice supposed to ask us questions?
Yeah, I think so. Are you here, Alice? Alice?
Here I am.
Okay.
Yeah. Great discussion, ladies. Thank you.
Thank you. This has been a pleasure. Yeah.
I always learn so much, but you all have.
Good.
I do. I do.
It's nice.
I know that in your journeys that you have run across people that could use a shout out. And so I'm asking if you know any emerging author that you think we might have missed that is someone that you'd like to have us know about.
Well, I can think of 2 people. One is Jean Nordhaus, and she has several books out for several years. And I think she's a wonderful poet and should be read more. The other I'm going to mention is someone who is no longer with us, which is not really what you asked, but the poet Roland Flint is, I think, one of the best poets of our times, and nobody knows about him. And I don't know if his books are still in print or not. If they aren't, they should be, because he's quite remarkable. But those are 2 that I could think of.
Is it Flint, Linda? Flint, Roland?
Yes, it is.
And Jean Nordhaus, is it Nord?
Nordhaus.
Oh, I was wondering.
Haus.
Yeah.
Oh, great. So I just wrote those down. I'm going to shamelessly promote 2 fellow poets in here who I think are incredible, that both have books coming out in 2023 and 2024. The first is Claudia Acevedo Quiñones, who's also read in the series.
Yes,
Way
she
to
has.
go. Give her a shout out. I forget, it's the hurricane. I guess she can't unmute herself, but I don't want to mangled your title, Claudia. She's a fantastic.
Type it in the chat, Claudia, if you would, the title of
your
Claudia,
would
book.
Please do that. Yes, fantastic. Yes, thank you, book. Claudia. It's fantastic. It's coming out, Rose Metal Press. Oh, my brain is working. In 2023, and also Anthony DiPietro, who's like one box down to me on the right. Fantastic fellow poet who always thanks me because my compliments to Anthony is that he writes such tasty poems. And he does. They're really just fantastic. So he has a book coming out in 2024. Put it in the chat. He's a poet of incredible energy and vitality, also sexy, which is always great, you know, as a poet, when you're reading a particular poem. So those are my shout outs to you.
Kiss and Release. The title.
Oh, Kiss and Release is, yes, thank you. Perfect.
Anthony put it in the chat. Right.
Beautiful. Thank you, Anthony. It's a great title, right? My sonnet collection is Catch and Release, and he's Kiss and Release. So we have to do a reading together, Anthony. Totally. Great.
Well, if you need a venue to host a Zoom event, let me know.
Oh, yes, we do. Thank
you.
Thank you, Alice.
Absolutely. Stay in touch. Absolutely. I love it.
Other questions for us?
Yes. What advice would you give to a writer working on their very first book?
Well, one thing to writers that are putting together a book or just sending out poems is not to take too seriously rejection. If an editor loves your work and you know it really isn't that good, but you send, don't be convinced that your work is better than it is. But most important, don't get discouraged by rejection. I think I started writing poems when I was 12, and I started sending them to the Atlantic Monthly when I was 12 years old, because that's the magazine that came to the house. And over the years, the Atlantic used to have, they used to have two kinds of rejection letters. One was the standard, sorry, we can't use your work now. And the other said, we really like this poem, sorry, we can't use it, do try us again, something like that. And over the years, I collected 10 of those second kinds of rejections and stapled them together and sent them into the Atlantic saying, I hear that you could exchange 10 of these for one acceptance.
Oh, that's great.
But it did not work, let me say. It did not
work. And I'm shocked.
Take anything. But the point was
an A for creativity.
That editor, I don't remember.
It's just so great.
Name, they didn't like my work particularly. And eventually she left, and Peter Davison became the poetry editor, and he liked my work. It was the same work. It depends on, you know, who you send it to, what mood they're in. Just don't take too seriously other people's opinion. Listen to it, but don't be discouraged by it. That's what I would say to young writers.
I would second that. I wrote my first poem when I was 38, so I'm a late bloomer. I was prone to thinking, oh, I'm sending out my work, you know, this is the pit, don't go into that pit. Oh, well, they didn't take it, it must not be any good. You know, this is not the way to think. So you cannot think that way. I will say that Anthony DiPietro is like, he's a fellow poet who's like can submit 200 times a year. I mean, he's really great. And so he kind of got me over that hump of just doing it. And not taking it personally. And I think it was Marianne Moore who said a poem is never done until she sent it out 40 times. You know,
wow.
So I sort of share that with undergrads, you know, that you have to think about it that way, 30 times or 40 times or 50 times, or even Molly Peacock. I was talking with her at one point, and there was one particular book she was having difficulty with, and she's published many, 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 many books, right? And she said she went through 30 rejections. And this was within the last, you know, recently, not in her youth. I also think it's cyclical, that you go through periods where people like you, and take your work, and then you go through periods where they don't, and that's the zeitgeist, and it's kind of out of your control. So that's a good thing to like take your personhood, your fragile ego out of the equation.
Well, that brings up a really interesting point, though, because from this standpoint in book world, it is dramatically changed in the last 3 to 4 years. It's not just that they're choosing fewer and fewer books, but with all of the mergers, who knows? A lot of the institutional knowledge that, I used to be able to call up an editor friend of mine at certain places, and all of those people are retiring. But my sense is that they're not bringing along a younger generation. And so it gets turfed out to someone with no institutional knowledge. Are you experiencing any of that? And from your standpoint, Linda, you've been published quite a bit.
Yeah. Do you want to speak to that?
Books, I've been lucky. My second book, Norton published, and they published everything.
Oh, they're great. Yeah.
So I don't have to think about where to send it.
Well, no, that's
the bliss. The bliss that is Norton.
My first book, A Perfect Circle of Sun, when I didn't know anything or anybody, I sent to a small press, which may still exist, the Swallow Press in Chicago. And after a year, I still hadn't heard from them. And I had to go to Chicago to a wedding. So I went to their office and I knocked on the door and I said, "You've had my manuscript for a year. Either give me a decision or give me my book back." And he said, "Okay, I'll take it." So,
oh my God, that's a great story.
That's how I started. That was my first book. My second
book
that's
great.
Was taken.
You got some,
my second book was taken by Live Right, which published then, and the editor that liked it then stopped being an editor, and Live Right was bought by Norton. And I mean, that was just luck.
They're fabulous. They're wonderful to work with.
They let me choose my own cover. I mean, I love Norton, I really do. I also want to say that when I started sending out poems, I hadn't done any writing for about 10 years. I'd just been home with children and such. And the action of getting rejections was better than not getting anything at all. At least I felt I was interacting with
That's
with
an interesting perspective. At least you're
That's
hearing
really
back one way or another.
You were in play. Your work was in play, you could say, right? There was a flow. I always try to have 8 to 10 things out at all times. And if it gets too low, to push it back up to 8 or 10, so that there's work going out and there's work coming back and then there's work going out. So I sort of try and give that to everybody, in whatever piece of art, whatever kind of art you're making, to kind of keep that flow going in sending it out into the world,
but
regardless
no matter
of
where
whether
you
it comes
are
back or
in the
not.
book publishing universe, whether it's your first book or whether it's your umpteenth book, I just want to commend both of you, because publishing nowadays is a lot tougher, whether you're established or not, because of Harper's in the middle of a strike. Random House doesn't buy Simon and Schuster. I mean, most of them have a lot of stuff going on. Macmillan moved downtown, and where they should have stayed right in the Flatiron building, now they have regrets. I mean, everybody, so what? But they're all going through. We ordered for this holiday season early summer, just to make sure that we got our books.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
So you were ordering, Alice, in May, June.
I've just ordered through next spring.
And is that
there's two reasons I've been given. One is because the lines at the printers, because there are fewer printers than before the pandemic. I think 2 out of the 5 major printers in China folded. But also the other, and I don't want to get away from your work, but there are a lot of publishers, the smaller presses, God bless them, are trying to move to this country. Many of them are printing in the US, so those prices do go up. So there's that, most of the people that shop in independent bookstores are looking for that special book. that may not be, you know, the big splashy thing. My biggest events, this will warm your hearts. Our biggest events here are poetry events.
Oh, warm my heart. Thank you.
So I'm a serious fan of great poetry. I really enjoy it. So I want to ask you all, both of you, excuse me, what are you reading right now?
Oh, it's at 8 o'clock already. I could stay here forever.
Yes, I know, and I could too, because it's been a wonderful evening.
Well,
go ahead. You
I've
go first, Linda.
Reading memoirs lately. And the one that I just finished was I Am by Maggie O'Farrell. She's the one that has just written the marriage portrait and
Hamnet.
Right, but her memoir is really, really wonderful. And then I've been rereading Stephen Dunn's New and Selected Poems.
Oh, beautiful.
I really love, and those are on my nightstand at the moment that you asked. Yeah.
I'm writing down. Yeah, thank you. Miranda, what are you reading these days?
I'm going to show you this book because it's so beautiful. This is can you see that? How gorgeous is this?
What a lovely cover.
So this is the poet John Yao, I think I've got his name right, wrote this. It's called Joe Brainerd, The Art of the Personal. And Joe Brainerd was an extraordinary a painter, and also he wrote this fantastic book of poems called I Remember, which I teach to 12-year-olds and any age. And this is a book about Joe's life. We lost him in the 90s to AIDS, and here he is. Joe, such a wonderful man. This book is so beautiful. It's Rizzoli. It's got to be Rizzoli, right? Because it's so gorgeous. So I just show that to you because it's so extraordinary. I'm about, guess what I'm reading.
Linda's new book, yay!
Linda's new book. And I'm about to start T. Fleischman, Time is the Thing a Body Moves Through. And I'm also about to start Amy Fusselman's The Means, because she's just wickedly funny. And I met her because we both have our hair done at the same time every, 4 months or something. And we just got to be friends. And now we're fellow writer friends. Amy Fusselman, Fusselman. She's wickedly funny. She's really great. So that's what I'm reading.
Right.
That's it. We're
Ladies,
up. We have to go now.
I know. I know. This is a very quick hour, ladies. I enjoyed myself so thoroughly, and I know
total pleasure.
Watching the chat, everybody really. There were so many questions that I could have asked, but you all know it. There's a great conversation to be had here. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you. Of course.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you, my friends from former and present lives. It's such an incredible variety. I'm so moved that you guys showed up. It's really lovely. So I thank you all. That's it. You're going to chop us off.
I am. I took you off because I'd like to thank both of you, Linda and Miranda, for participating in Write America this evening. And to all of you who tuned in tonight, and most especially, thank you to Roger Rosenblatt for creating this original and important series to look forward to each week. Tonight's episode is the perfect example of the purpose and mission of Write America. We hope to see you all next Monday, November 28th. As we welcome Frank Bedart and Richard Tillinghast. Thank you all for joining.
Good night.
Thank you all for joining us tonight, and have a happy Thanksgiving. Bye.
Thank you, Alice.
You're welcome. It was wonderful. Thanks again.
It was wonderful. Thank you, Linda.